the show, South Africa is a movie.
Welcome to the watch party!
Oh, you can hear it's getting late at night. People are losing it, but I'm so thrilled for this final interview of the show. One of the ongoing dramas of this year has been South Africans finding out in just what a bad way the South African National Defence Force is in. Because basically this year, the Defence Force has done nothing but launch a podcast. For some reason. I don't know why the Defence Force thinks it needs a podcast, but while the Defence Force has been doing its podcast, South African troops have lost battles in the DRC, been captured, and they are still, many of them have not been brought back from the Democratic Republic of Congo yet. There are radar arrays that are going down. There is dysfunction in the Navy with very few ships currently operable, dysfunction in the Air Force with very few airplanes currently being operable. It's an absolute mess. And so, to find out exactly what is going on from one of the in-the-know experts of South Africa, please welcome from Protection Web, Ricardo Teixeira is here. So let's start with our soldiers in Goma, DRC. The last time you were on our show, which feels like years ago now, but it was probably only 3 months, we were talking about how the SANDF was part of a peacekeeping operation with a specific mission in Goma and seemed to have become trapped by and defeated by the M23 group backed by Rwanda's army. And most people were saying, well, what the hell are we doing there? We didn't even know we were there. Cut to 3 months later or so. Why are our troops still there? What is going wrong?
To begin with, the mission in the DRC, we have 2 missions there at the current point. We have MONUSCO and we have SAMI DRC, which has recently been terminated and was not under the UN, it was under the Southern African Development Community. Now, that was not a peacekeeping mission, no matter how many times the government likes to say it was a peacekeeping mission. According to its mandate, they were there to neutralize enemy forces and restore order.
Okay.
That is peace enforcement. Now, the big problem came in due to the history of South Africa's involvement in the DRC over the last 20 years, where we've been under MONUSCO and previously MONUC doing peacekeeping. There wasn't a change in doctrine or strategy from the MONUSCO strategy to SAMI DRC. So they took over the same bases where they were very close to civilian populace and were not commanding the high ground, and they didn't take the offensive strategy that they should have. And due to poor intelligence and a mission that was poorly planned and poorly equipped, they very quickly found themselves on the back foot. And even though the deployment was started in December 2023, come December 2024, it was extended. So those troops had already been there for a year in not a good environment. And they'd already had a couple injuries and a couple service members were killed. And there was a potential fragging, an inside attack on one of the majors that was involved there, Major Peter Otola Peterse. And, you know, then the insurgents went on the offensive and they quickly captured Goma and Sake and the entire north bank of Lake Kivu in the North Kivu province, and then started swinging around. And our troops were confined to their bases. And, you know, the government still likes to say, they had a press release or press briefing recently in the beginning of the month. And the minister and the chief of the Defence Force stopped short of having a victory lap, saying that they've contributed to peace and that peace has been achieved.
What, by losing?
Pretty much.
So they were defeated and they were like, but the fighting ended.
They said, look, there's been dialogue and there's been peace now. But, you know...
But they lost.
Yeah, if that is what victory looks like to them, I don't want to see what defeat looks like.
That's like Arsenal saying, didn't we contribute to a great title race with Liverpool? like we really played our part in coming second by a long way in that title race. That's crazy.
So they've been trying to get the troops out now for the last, since January, since we were last here.
And why can't they get them out? Is anyone stopping them, or have they just not hired enough golden arrows?
It's a very complicated issue. So Rwanda isn't controlling the territory. The territory is controlled by M23. Now, some of the troops are at the airport in Goma. Now, the runway is not currently being used. It is out of action, but this is because of some mortar damage to the runway.
Oh, some bombs hit it. Okay.
Some bombs hit it, but this is something that can be repaired relatively quickly, and it seemed like in the beginning when they announced that they were going to be withdrawing, that there would be a UN technical team assessing the runway to see what would be done, and it would be repaired and reopened. Then M23 reneged on that agreement, and it seemed that the course of action was going to be to drive the troops out of Goma through Rwanda into Tanzania. And they've begun that process, but how the process typically follows that sort of withdrawal is that it goes equipment first, non-essential personnel, combat troops, and then lastly the special forces and the high-ranking officers that are there to tie up the logistical train.
Oh, interesting.
So currently about 40% of the equipment has been removed. Now, again, the troops in December had already been there for a year. Then they had what is arguably the biggest military defeat in SANDF's history, even South African Army history.
You reckon? The biggest military defeat in South African Army history?
This is the first time where South African troops were overrun by a non-state actor.
Wow.
And they were then confined to their bases for about 4 months and only now starting to withdraw. So they've been there about 15 months, living on about 1 meal a day and dry rations, surrounded by enemy troops,
And
not allowed to leave their bases.
Last 4 months in captivity.
In captivity, and they are slowly being withdrawn. So there is a lot of poor morale, and the troops are very unhappy, and there's a lot of discontent. I know there was an article in the city press and the report yesterday from Erica Gibson that laid forth some of those frustrations from the troops. And it's clear to see the troops are not happy, and there are some paratroopers there that had this experience as well 12 years ago in Bangui when they had to withdraw and were kind of left out in the wind, and now this has happened to them again.
So why have we got to this state of affairs? What has happened here? I assume our troops aren't bad soldiers.
No.
How have they been failed? What has happened here?
It is a combination of a lack of strategic vision, poor planning, and the result of 30 years of government policy to underfund defense. There is no other way around it.
Okay, so austerity and money cuts, budget cuts, has hollowed out our defence force.
Yeah.
Why has the government chosen to reduce spending on our defence force over the last 30 years, according to them?
Well, that is the difficult thing to answer because there's a YouTube video with another prominent defence analyst, Michael Shirkin, where he lays the point that we had more pressing concerns. There was social spending and social programs that needed to be funded. I mean, Angie Motshekga herself said to me that she spent 15 years asking for the defence budget to be cut so she could get more money in education. Ironically, she now is in the portfolio of defence and has to ask for that money back. So it's, there were more pressing concerns at the time, but it was a failure in long-term strategy to realise that this is your defence policy. You can't build an army in a day. When you place an order for equipment, for ships or jets or tanks or whatever it is, you don't get it tomorrow. It takes months and years for it to be delivered, and then you have to go through operational integration so that people know how to use it, how to maintain it, and then it gets, troops get trained on it, and then you build up that capability. As soon as a jet comes into service, it's not like tomorrow you can say, okay, go drop some bombs.
Sure.
You're going to have about 2 or 3 years before that is fully operable.
I understand the argument that we had more pressing concerns. We're not a nation that has historically needed an active defence force, at least since 1994. But the fact that now they can't even pull off relatively not massive operations in other countries for which South Africa is committed to being a part of means that we should probably be spending more on our military, right? Or just stop participating in national peacekeeping / peace enforcement operations altogether, which I doubt that we will do because we, at least in South Africa, consider ourselves leaders in Africa who try to promote peace. So then why is there no political will to spend more on the military?
There is a complete lack of strategic vision, not only within the Department of Defence, but within SANDF. As you said, there were no threats of conventional assault from our neighbours, but it didn't mean there were no threats to begin with. We lived, at the time that the Defence Review and everything was happening, it was around the transition in 94 to 98. We had the Rwandan genocide, we had the Great African War, or the Second Congo War, and that was originally drew us into DRC. We had the issues in Sudan, where we deployed troops in the early 2000s. We had a instability and crisis growing in Lesotho that forced us to intervene militarily when they'd already decided that, we were never going to be involved in external conflict, and it immediately proved to be false. But there was never a change in strategy to realize that, yes, we may not be facing conventional threats, but it doesn't mean we aren't facing any threats. So what the government has failed to do is to shift the military doctrine and strategy towards something that is currently being defined and very well researched in the United States as irregular warfare, which is your military operations other than conventional conflict, which includes peacekeeping, which includes preemptive special operations, and it includes intervention missions in the region and a rapid reaction capability. We have laid this out in the 96 White Paper, the 98 Defence Review, and the 2015 Defence Review. It was argued in all of those papers that, hey, we need to make this shift. We need to have a relative degree of strategic depth that we can take advantage of and to react to threats before they become too big. But the implementation and the funding and the follow-through on all those plans has fallen flat at every step of the way.
And it's what, just because the government, the politicians ultimately don't care, they want to spend on other things?
Well, you need only to look at how the government treats the portfolio of defence, and it's kind of been a portfolio where the people that have been appointed there have been rewarded for loyalty to the party, and they've come from other departments.
Yeah.
Lindiwe Sisulu went from intelligence to defense, and then she went on. Nosiviwe Mapisa Ngakula went from corrections to defense and then to department.
Now to jail, which is she went back to corrections.
Yep, and we had
circle.
Thandi Modise, who went from Speaker of Parliament into the defence portfolio, and now we had the Education Minister get put into the defence portfolio. There has been a profound lack of seriousness in the government and in Parliament for politicians that understand the nature of defence and what is required in that portfolio.
So what do you think is going to realistically happen now? We're going to get a new budget on Wednesday, which everybody pinky swears is the real one that we're actually going to get, which is fabulous because it's been stressing me out. And there are probably going to be budget cuts within that because they didn't do the VAT increase, but we'll see how they shake it down. I imagine it's not looking good for defence spending in this year to come. Do you almost feel like South Africa should just go, we're not going to do peacekeeping anymore? We just don't have the capacity, we don't have the capability, we're sending our troops into terrible situations where they are dying and getting captured and losing. We should just face the reality that if we're not going to have a budget for operations, we're not going to do operations.
There within it lies a very crucial part of the argument, is that the government has decided that, we want to be, as they love to use the phrase, silencing the guns, which drives me nuts because the only ones that have gone silent are our own. Everyone in the region seems to be spending more money on defence. You're seeing our neighbouring countries reach towards the 2% mark. In Europe, we're seeing the 3.5 and the 5% argument. The US is pushing towards 5 as well. I mean, Poland's spending 4%. We're spending 0.7%.
Right.
But it's not matching the government's ambition for what they want the Defence Force to do, and neither does the way it's designed. So I am not confident. I'm not going to hold my breath on a dramatic increase in defence spending, but there have been several arguments and some points raised by the Department of Defence and the Deputy Minister and the President himself that they're going to raise defence spending to 1.5% of GDP. It would literally double it. We'd be seeing a budget similar to the police of around 110 billion rand, which would be a lot more money. But I don't think this is something that's going to happen in 1 year. This is something they're going to have to ramp up to, because a large problem here is the way the Defence Force spends its money, is that they are failing to appropriately spend the little funds that they are getting.
Yeah, okay. And then finally, a lot of people have been talking about, and you yourself in this interview have been speaking about the failures of the SANDF's leadership. Are there ever consequences for military men and women who've got to that level through service, but have now shown themselves to either be incompetent or uncaring?
Well, there's one thing that I feel must be mentioned, and I'm probably going to get into a lot of trouble for this.
Excellent. I love these interviews.
But the current chief of the army was someone who had his request for amnesty under the TRC rejected and recommended for prosecution.
Really?
Which never happened.
Really?
And in fact, the prosecutor in that case who rejected his request for amnesty was actually a victim of his attack, which occurred in the early 90s, where in Kimberley he instructed someone to throw a grenade over a wall at a political gathering. And that same person that was injured in that attack, along with several others, was the person that tried his case. It was then recommended for prosecution, which never happened, and he is now the chief of the army.
I'm so sad that we're out of time. Why wasn't that at the beginning? Okay, well, we're definitely going to be following up on that. Ricardo, as always, thank you so much for your time. He's great. Don't you understand so much more now? Ricardo Teixeira, everybody. Thank you so much.